Hi, good morning. Today I am joined by Craig Collinson, author of this wonderful Improve Your Life 21 Strategies That Will Make a Difference. Craig, good morning. How you been?
Good morning to you. I've been well, thank you, in this bizarre year that we've all lived through. What about you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm good today. Do you know what I was thinking, right? And I don't know if you realise this, but I think we've known each other now, getting on for maybe 15 years.
I know. You were the people that did our very first website when we were total training in lovely Sutton-on-Sea, that was, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I was thinking because we used to go to 4N at Boston. You remember those days? Oh my goodness. So I can't get over how long it's been. But yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, isn't it?
It certainly has for both of us, and it continues.
So what have you been up to?
Well, in this last year, it's been a bizarre mix of the initial shock. That business diary was looking really quite busy. I was meant to be going off abroad to the Middle East for a period of training. And as many other trainers that I know and you do, within 2 or 3 days of COVID hitting, the diary emptied. There literally was no work, no paid work to be done. So after a period of what do we do about this? Then we started training on Zoom and found MS Teams, converted all the training to shorter, modularized, very different style than face-to-face training. And to be honest now, I absolutely love it. The feeling of going back. A few months ago, I got called to a client meeting, a face-to-face client meeting here in Louth, and I hadn't put my suit or my shoes or my shirt and tie on for months. And my wife Pam had been saying, putting a little bit of weight on now. And when I came to fasten my shirt, I couldn't. When I came to put my trousers on, I barely could. So I waddled up to the meeting in shoes that I'd not worn for months, and that was a real shock to the system to think that I'd spent in sweatpants and carpet slippers for all this time. So now what I've started to do now is wear shoes again to get myself ready for when that actually happens for real. So the training side of it, that's been an education, and as I say, I love it now, and I really can't wait to get back in front of people again. Yeah. But from the self-development side of things, after the initial shock and stress and overeating and over drinking and binging on Netflix and all the other stuff that everybody else says they've been up to as well, if they're honest, then I got back into reading, and I went on every webinar that I could find that was of value, immerse myself into researching and working on the next book, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So in reality, the year has flown by. It's been bizarre on so many levels and awful on so many levels, but by the same token, it's been a real opportunity to have some quality time to do things that I wouldn't have had time to do had it not happened. Having said that, I can't wait for it to be over.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. There's so many people have said that it's opened doors that previously they'd have never considered even knocking on.
No.
And I think it's given us all a chance just to slow down for a minute and rethink, recalibrate and figure out what it is we want to do and what's important. Yeah. The thing about the shoes, one of my authors, Mariette, she says she wears shoes to do things like this because she said it puts her in the right mind frame. So she still wears her proper shoes, even though no one's ever going to see them. Nope. And probably like the most of us is only actually dressed from the waist up. But she always puts her proper shoes on. She said it kind of grounds her, and she sits.
Yes. Well, I'm sitting here in carpet slippers, I'll admit. However, the grounding technique, which I learned years ago, is simply to, whether you're in socks, bare feet, slippers or shoes, as long as both soles of your feet are fully connected to the ground, then that's a fabulous confidence, assertiveness trick. And it's one of the simpler, I'll talk about it in the next book, but it's things like that, just quick fix, easy things that people can do. So even though in my slippers, I am fully connected to ground, so I don't need my shoes on. But it's like everything else. If it works for you, it works.
Yeah,
and if shoes work, they work. What
you've just said there, so one of those simple tricks, I remember this from the very, very first time I saw you. You did your, I think you got your 10-minute slot at the forehand, and that was the first time I ever saw you, we ever met. And I learnt a couple of things from you that have stayed with me all of this time. The first one was that the first impression you make isn't when you walk through the door, and it's the getting out of your car in the car park, because you don't know who's looking out of the window. So, don't rearrange your underwear or, pick your nose or anything like that. I think they were the examples you gave. So that one stayed with me, that thought of, you don't know. So that's the first impression that they're getting of you, is you getting out of your car and walking across the car park.
Yeah.
And the second was something to do with a lighter. And I'm trying to rack my brains to think what you did with a lighter. There was a lighter and a candle, I think you had.
Oh, that's a great trick. It's you've heard me say this before. People on the call might not have. I believe that as a trainer, to steal from one person is plagiarism, but to steal from many is just research. And I'm a very well-researched trainer. So years ago, there was a guy called John Fenton, fabulous sales trainer. And at the end of his seminar that I went to, I think it was in Leeds, there were about 500 people in this room, and they've been talking about positive mindset and affirmations. And this guy, who wasn't John Fenton, one of his colleagues, lit a candle, and the routine was, okay, so we've been talking about affirmations and mindset. All I want you to do is look at the flame, and I want this side of the room to make the resonance, which is hum, hum. And I want this side of the room to make the resonance, which is the sound of ah, ah. So you've got 500 people humming and harring, looking at the flame and thinking of the word extinguish. And he said, because we'll make the sound, think of the word extinguish, look at the flame. So the flame burned, off you go. Ah, okay, stop. Blew it out. Laughter. He said, that's the most valuable lesson I can give you in positive thinking. You can sit on your bums umming and ahhing and thinking about it all you like, but until you take some action, nothing's going to happen. So I researched that at the time, and every opportunity that I get to do it, and the last time I got to do it was actually the whole business culture about a year or so ago, and everybody always falls for it, and it's just a wonderful, simple but funny way to it. But the message is true. We can all think about it, but unless you take the action that's going to make it possible, nothing's ever going to happen, is it?
No. So that, I mean, your background obviously is comedy, isn't it?
Allegedly.
We would be remiss in not talking about the fact of comedy. If you see me glance this way, we might have a visitor. Odin is debating at the moment whether he's about to yelp or demand to be set free. I'm not quite sure which. And as if on cue, see, you know what? They say you can't work with dogs, you can't train them. Look at that, trained him to speak.
Is he going to come and say hello?
Odin, come. He's not looking at it. He can say hello.
I think he'll do. Given the size of him, he'll do what he likes. Oh my word! Here he is.
No, he's having it. He's too busy. He's going to go and chew my desk, I think, now, and just out of spite. So let's talk comedy then.
Well, as a get out of jail card for me, I was never the funny one. So I was in a comedy double act, a traditional Morecambe and Wise, Cannon and Ball, little and large type comedy double act. And that started when Martin and I teamed up when we were still at school. We were 15 years old, and we started putting this act together in Sheffield. It's dreadful. And we used to hire the local church hall once a week, Tuesday evening. There's always a critic. And we used to rehearse this stuff in front of our parents with a PA kit that they'd bought on hock for us, bless them. And then we started doing the working men's clubs in Sheffield after we'd won the Search for a Star grand final at the Dunes Theatre, Mablethorpe. Heady Heights. So we won an enormous trophy and 100 quid. And that was the start of it. And then we started did a handful of working men's clubs. And I remember the feeling of walking out in front of 300-400 people, wet lit so you could see them, and doing half an hour to nothing. No, not a sound. They were so what I mean is no laugh. So they were kind enough to sit there and look at us, but I think they were bewildered by us more than anything. So they'd just sit and look, and that was how we learned. And then we joined the staff of the Maid Marian Club at Chapel St Leonard's for an 18-week residency, £34 a week, buy your own gas bottle. And we got a caravan to live in, and we had about 30 minutes of material that we had to eke out over 6 days, and afternoons and evening shows. But we were part of the cabaret team, and we did floor shows, and we did our own spots, and we learned, and we learned, and we learned. And I talk about in the book, there was a guy called Ian Sludge Lees, who was one of the visiting comedians, and he was the first example of affirmations that I'd ever seen. So during that season, he used to stand in front of the full-length mirror with his permed hair and his little Birmingham body and this Hawaiian shirt. And before he went out in front of the 2,000 people in the club, he would be jumping up and down in front of the mirror saying, "You're a very funny man, you're a very funny man, you're a very funny man," for about 2 minutes. And I thought he was insane. And then he went out and he was a very funny man. And that I thought, what on earth is he doing? But that was the first form of affirmation I'd ever seen. So from the Maid Marian Club, and what was funny about that is we died a horrendous death. I saw your interview with my friend and your friend Mike McLean that you did a few weeks ago, and I know Mike was talking about comedians have to die. You have to go through the awful pain of death in order to become good, and he's right, you do. And we died for 18 weeks at the Maid Marian Club until the very last night of the season, where Martin, because we did impressions at the time as well, and I impersonated Mr. Badley, who was the owner of multi-millionaire, octogenarian, used to come onto the tannoy at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning and say things like, "Maid Marian Club, the warmest and sunniest spot in Lincolnshire. Good morning." And then he'd go off, and at random points during the day, just come on and say something ridiculous. So with that as a starting point, I was Mr. Badley, and Martin was Bruce Forsyth interviewing for a spot at the Maid Marian Club. And it was about 7 minutes. It brought the house down. We got laughs like we'd never got before. We got a standing ovation as far as I can remember.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. Then we went back about 2 years later in the suits and the bow ties and did a proper cabaret that went really quite well in comparison. And from there, we joined the staff of Warner Holiday as green coats, became assistant entertainment managers, did that for 5 years, then went into cabaret, panto, summer season, theatre tours. So all in all, we did it professionally for about 11 years. But then when I wasn't going to become part of the next Morecambe and Wise, I decided to bail out and get a proper job. And that's why I'm sitting here as a trainer and a speaker these days. But yeah, it was an unbelievable education, and to be able to see and watch people like Bob Monkhouse and Ted Rogers and Tom O'Connor and all these wonderful old-time comedians. That's how I learned to tell jokes, by watching and learning. And we're back to plagiarism again, to steal from many, just research.
So I mean, you brought that humour into you bring it into everything that you do. Whilst there's a very serious side to the coaching and your sort of methods, there's always the humour in there. And I do.
It settles people down.
Yeah, I mean, I recall receiving your first manuscript and sending it back. I think with the immortal words of "Craig, it's shit." I think was what I said.
It's like poetry. I think that was it, and it was you. I can't. You've got to find your voice.
Yeah,
and I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, because obviously because I know you and I know how funny you are, and I you've always sort of said with all the things that I've seen you say, it wasn't in there, and you'd written it like every other coach. And I'm like, no, it's got to sound like you. And I think if I recall, Pam was on my side, and had said something very similar. So so what you said
very
back,
similar to the first thing you said, actually.
Yeah. I've always liked Pam. So you redid it, and it came back into, oh my goodness, now I can hear you, because I think that's really important, particularly when you're out, when you do a lot with the PSA now. For those of you that aren't aware, that's the Professional Speaking Association.
It is. You're right. Well done, you.
Which we were, but I'm not a member at the moment, but I know you still are. Are you still regional?
No. In 2019, I had the privilege of being the regional president for the Yorkshire region. Each of the different, for people who are not aware, each of the, I think it's 11 or 12 regions now throughout the country have a regional president who looks after the agenda and books the speakers and hosts the events. And then there's a national president as well. This year's national president is a great guy called Steve Bustin, who also did it last year as well. But that was a wonderful opportunity, and that the regional presidency came about because there really was no one to take over from a great guy called Nathan Littleton, who'd been running the region. And it coincided with me thinking, actually, I've not been to many meetings in the previous year because Mum had died, and everybody who's experienced the grief, it affected me quite deeply, as you would have expected it would. And one of the things was I didn't go to many, many PSA meetings. And then when it came to renewal, it was a crossroads. It was either I actually take the PSA seriously again and really start going, or I pack it in and don't go anymore. And I thought, well, they need a president. I've got to go if I'm the president. And that was the thought process. So I jumped in with both feet. I took on the role. I did it to the best of my abilities, which meant that I had to be there every month. It was the best thing I could have possibly done. I loved every second of it. Handed over to a great president in Steve Judge, who's a wonderful speaker as well, an author. And now we've got a lovely lady called Olga Judane, who's running it now. But yeah, for anybody out there, just look. If you're interested at all in knowing more about or speaking better, educating yourself as a professional speaker, meaning you're going to get paid for it. That's the definition of professional. You're going to get paid for it. Then look up the Professional Speaking Association and get yourself, of course, at the minute to a virtual meeting. And then when the world sorts itself out, we'll be able to get back face to face again. But yeah, wonderful organisation, the PSA. But it was, as many things in my life have happened, it was a fluke decision, and thankfully I came down on the right side of it. It was a wonderful place.
So we released that. I want to say
2017.
Not that long. I was going to go 4. Crikey. Oh, okay. That is 4. Yeah. I'm proud.
Yeah. I know.
Hey, genius maths, me.
Blink of an eye. And because you were there at the launch, I made a commitment to the audience, the lovely audience who were there at the book launch, that I would then write a book a year until I got to 25, and then clearly I didn't. However, and Pam, when are you going to finish this new book? When? And it's a completely fair question. And of course, I can fall back on, well, I've been busy. And then there was the grief because of mum, and. But the fact is, I said I'd do something and I didn't do it. And what I'm about to do on LinkedIn is make a new commitment that the manuscript will be with you by the end of June this year, as I've already told you.
Yes.
But thinking about it, as we were talking before we went live today, just because, for any authors out there, just because you're not physically standing at your writing station or sitting at your keyboard tapping away, if you are learning, if you're being aware, if you are keeping notes, if you're doing your prep and your research, you're in the process of. So for the last few years, whilst I've not physically been doing much on the new book, I have been in a constant state of study and preparation. And as I told you before we started, under the desk is an enormous plastic box full of prep and notes and references for the new book. And for those people who this might help, this is the new book here. So there it is, look, there's me on the back, look, there I am, there's the spine. So this new book, The Art of Successful Communication, the reason that it's formed already like that is because of a technique that I learned from the wonderful Dr. Wayne Dyer years ago on one of his YouTube seminars. And right at the very, very end, it was about an hour and 20 minutes, the seminar. Right at the very end, he dropped the pearl of wisdom of, before he ever wrote a word, of all his multi-award-winning, million-selling books, he faked up the finished product and put it in his eye line. And when he stood at his writing station, because he apparently wrote everything by hand, he would look at the finished product, and then all he needed to do was populate it with the words until it became reality. So that's what I did with Improve Your Life. I mocked up a copy.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And it became, and this is what I'm doing with the next one. And it sits so I can see it in my eye line. So I know it's already finished. All I need to do now is put the hours in, because Taryn, you know better than anybody how many hours it takes to write a book. But to start with the end product, is such a fabulous thing to do. Then, of course, you got to meet it halfway and do the work, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, what you just said there about, as long as you're doing the research and you're thinking about it, that's still part of the process. You can't. I get a little bit cross with these people sort of say, yeah, write your book in 6 days, or we can. No, well, you can. Of course you can. You can write a book in a week. You can write a book in 30 days. Is it going to be a great book? No, it's not, because you're not going to have taken the time to do exactly what you've done. If it's going to be something that's special and it's going to be something that has value, it takes that time. And if it takes you 2 years, 12 months, 4 years, because you did say 1 a year, but if it takes you 4 years to do it, then that's how long it takes. But what you're going to put into it has a lot more value than if you just gone, right, I said I'd write a book this year, I'll write a book.
And had I churned one out the year after, it wouldn't have been this book. It would have been, because this was the title I had in mind. It would have been this book, but it absolutely wouldn't have been, because this book now is, the new one is going to be a book in 2 halves, very deliberately. So it's communication with self and communication with others. So in terms of the communication with others, it's all the things that I've trained in for all these years, but going to be in a book form. So it's questions, it's listening, it's assertiveness techniques, body language, building rapport, first impressions, all that stuff that people tend not to know. So if that can be put in an easy format for people to read and apply, wonderful. But then for me, the far more important side of it is communication with yourself, because that for me is the starting point of everything. So there, although I touched on it in Improve Your Life, we're going to go into far more detail, we as in me and you eventually, are going to go into far more detail about paradigms, mental programs, affirmations, visualization, use of your imagination, all the nitty-gritty things that years ago I didn't know. And it's the old line about teach the lessons that you need to learn yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm in a constant state of educating myself in order that I can then put that down on paper in order to help somebody else. But in respect of in COVID time, I'd written down on a sheet of paper that I needed to know far more about imagination and paradigms. That's what I needed to know about. Literally within hours, and I'm really not making it up for dramatic effect, something popped into my inbox, which was a free 3-day free seminar with Bob Proctor on paradigm shifts. So clearly I signed up for that and was a very, very good student and watched it multiple times. Then I found information about imagination, which led me to all sorts of new authors. It led me to reread or re-listen, because I love audio as well as books, re-listen to Wishes Fulfilled by Wayne Dyer, which then led me to Neville Goddard, which is all about imagination. And it's just the amazing thing, as we were talking about before we went live, about what you put out there to whatever you believe the universe is, and then what tends to come back, and the power of belief systems. But the fact is, that was the thought I had. That was what I put out, and that was what presented itself literally within hours. So the communication with self is just amazing. But it's a funny thing happened a few months ago. I was doing some MS Teams training for one of my clients, and this particular one was how to choose positivity. So it was two different sessions, 2 hours each. And on the second session, someone we had a little 5-minute break, and when I plugged my ear pods in just before we were due to go live again for the second half, somebody in an office with one of the other delegates who'd already been on the training said, so everybody was back on the screen, everybody heard it, said, oh, you're doing that positivity course? Oh my God, it's so boring. All he talks about is how you talk to yourself. And then, oh, anyway, where's that paper? And we all looked at one another along the screen, went, so it was, I said to the group, are you actually getting any value out of this? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But it was just a real great reminder about you can be presenting what you know is factually correct to the best of your ability to know it. And if people aren't ready to hear it or don't want to know it, they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
And what can you do about that? And of course, the answer is nothing. But it just made me howl.
Right, so I'm going to put you on the spot because I can. 21 strategies that will change your life. All right. So bearing in mind where we are now, pick one. What do you reckon is the strategy for now?
The strategy for now would always be gratitude. Because it's the simple, I mean, all of them I flick through. I haven't read it for ages, but I flicked through this morning knowing that you probably asked me something about it. And because they're all meant to be dippers, and you just flick open and there it is for the period of time that you need, that you're in. But for any period of time, whatever's going on in your world, however good or bad or indifferent it is, just to understand that you can shift the way you feel. I'm not talking about frequency or anything like that. I'm just talking about to shift the way you feel and shift your perspective simply by being grateful for whatever it is that you can think of at that moment. So whether it's that I've got fresh, clean water to drink now, or I've got a really comfy chair to sit in, or I'm talking to an old friend, or the fact I've got a roof over my head, or a tin of beans in the cupboard, or a lovely car on the drive, or it could just be I've got a nice pencil to write with. But to take your mind instantly off, so the mindfulness technique of what have I got to be grateful for in this moment, and just change your mentality, change your attitude, and and you can do it at any time you choose to. So from a simplicity point of view, even in these times of COVID, to be grateful for the fact I don't know anybody who's had it. I don't know anybody who's died from it personally. I have got my jab on Sunday this week, so I've not had to wait that long, really. Just to be grateful that we're all still here. We've all survived it. Not to focus on the fact that all the business went down the tubes, but to be grateful for the fact that somehow it came back in a different form. And I just think that's so simple, so effective. But then again, the others about toxic types, being aware of the people who are around you that cause you to feel awful, understanding that the more time you spend around pessimistic people, the more often that you're in their splash zone, the more often they're going to have an effect on you. The things in the book about time management, the benefits of just making a simple list, and the release and relief you get when you cross something off your list.
Oh, yeah.
The book is designed as a brain dump of at that point 20 years of learning, and was designed to be written for people who don't like reading, like me, not a reader, I'm a listener, as I've said. And it's the thing about not lots of padding with case studies and examples, but just there's the meat of it. Do that. So that one of the other things which is key in the book is meditation. But meditation doesn't have to be sitting for half an hour in the lotus position. Meditation can simply be understanding you can just sit for 2 minutes and gaze into space, get into a place of no thinking or connection to whatever source you think is that you're connecting to. So it's a really great question, but it's almost impossible to bring it down to, as you know, to one, because they're all relevant at all times if you're in a place where it's going to be relevant and useful for you. But gratitude for everybody is, I think, just so easy to just hold on to and remember that.
Oh, but you see, what the question did do was get you fired up and excited about the book again, so that, I can quite seamlessly move into. Craig, thank you very, very much for joining me today. And
Pleasure.
if you want to find 21 strategies to change your life in a very simple, non-hard to slog through, and just pick it up and choose one to try and help you, then it's available in all good bookstores. It's available online, and I think on your website as well, if I am not mistaken.
We sell it live at events and through training courses. But as you said, the best place to get it is through Amazon.
Brilliant. Right. Well, Craig, thank you so much. And this is me cracking the whip to say I expect to see the book on my desk by the end of June.
You will see it, lady editor.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. Look after yourself. Take care.
Thank you, Taryn. All the best.